today is a continuation of that. So I'll try to bring you up to speed as much as possible. But today we are focusing only on goodness. Okay, we'll get started. Maybe some of us who were there last week can help us. So what you remember, like recapping. Thank you very much. So, if we can recap what we did last week for the newcomers today. Can we go ahead? Some recap from last week.
All our activities and reactions to stimulus are governed by 3 factors: goodness, passion, ignorance.
Okay.
So, a combination of these impels us to act in a certain way.
Sure. Anything that stuck with you last week?
Yeah, this is with everybody in this material world, and but to break from this, the objective or the goal is to connect to the Supreme Soul in such a way that every other relationship, is keeping that centric, God-centric, and then you can overcome these 3, or at least try to break from the cycle.
So we talked about transcendence as well last week. Okay. So, briefly, everything we see around us is governed by the 3 modes in material nature, not in the spiritual life. So, for example, during the day is 24 hours. There's 8 hours of goodness, 8 hours of passion, 8 hours of ignorance. So there are some characteristics. Goodness means good things. So, for example, selflessness. Being thoughtful, serene, balanced. These are some of the words that define goodness. Passion, on the other hand, is defined by selfishness, extremes. So for example, food that is very, very spicy or very sour is considered in the mode of passion. Then there is ignorance, which is basically either destructive, lazy, causes problems for oneself and for others. And so we see these 3 in various ratios and proportions in everything around us. Whether it's kinds and varieties of species, whether it's colors, whether it's our activities, time of the day, time of the year. These are governed by the 3 modes. So today the focus is to speak about how to cultivate a life of goodness. So we probably are aware of this, that a lot of times we want to do good, we have good intentions, but it does not end up doing good for others or ourselves. It's like this stuff. So how do we know what is good or what is bad? So we talked about this, so again a recap for some of us. Do you want to take a stab for being here? You were there, I remember very clearly. How do you know what is good?
We use our moral judgments.
So culturally that can be biased, right? Like the Greek wedding versus...
It could be biased, but we have to use our intelligence and decide, because we don't always know.
Correct.
We have to give to some higher power, which might be what we consider morality or something like that. Some higher power that we all agree on.
And we spoke about how morality changes over time. The teacher who was speaking, he was sharing that in the 1960s, to get kicked out of school, you had to throw a chewing gum at the teacher, or say something terrible to your friends, or hurt somebody. Today, that has come to, you have to come with a knife or a gun to school, and then you get kicked out of school. So over time, that changes, the standards change. So how do we know on what basis something is good or something is bad? And so for Vedic Vision Society, we will focus on the Bhagavad Gita, which is this book. It's a book that has over generations been appreciated by many thought leaders. They are transcendentalists from the 1800s. Mahatma Gandhi, Albert Einstein, Dr. King. So there are many people around the world who have benefited from this. And specifically this Bhagavad Gita, it's this version, we call it as it is, because it is coming through a chain of teachers and students over 5,000 years. It's an unbroken chain. And so it's not somebody's imagination, not somebody's translation. It is provided as it is. Just like a mailman carries a letter from one place to another, thus the teachers and the students carry the message down through many, many generations. And we have seen through the Hare Krishna movement, when it exploded in the 1960s, millions and millions of Bhagavad Gitas were sold around the world. And tens of thousands of people's lives changed for the better. People who were trying to find happiness in drugs, the hippies, the hippie movement, people who were trying to find happiness in other destructive processes, they were immediately able to give it up. It wasn't like having to go through therapy for 6 months and going back at it. No, the message is so powerful, and it pertains to the soul. So it really works from a deeper level. And thus we focus on standards, we focus on Bhagavad Gita. So I have some sheets that I'll pass around, take one and distribute the rest, that describe various things in the 3 modes of nature. I'll actually go back to the previous one. So take a couple of minutes to kind of peruse through it, and we'll talk about a couple of topics based on it. It's also a good self-examination. You can see which mode you're affected by most. Not constantly, it changes. Some of it might be culturally biased, you might not get the context, but we'll go through it together. See, I need one.
Prabhu, is today the first Navratri?
Okay. So we'll focus on 2 topics. One is happiness in the mode of goodness, and food in the mode of goodness, because those are things we can easily relate to, and it's going to be interesting. So let's talk about happiness. How do we define happiness?
Not wanting for anything.
Really?
Sure.
Okay, so satisfaction. Yes? Okay. Alex?
The absence of non-goodness.
That's actually, yeah. Anybody else? So let's talk about, before we go to goodness, let's talk about happiness in the other modes. So for passion, it is said, derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appear like nectar at first, but poison at the end. Do we have any experiences of such happiness?
Alcohol for some people.
Huh?
Alcohol for some people.
That's ignorance.
Oh,
I'm talking about passion.
Some food. Eating too much prasadam.
Oh,
It makes me think of spicy food.
Yes,
No, not.
precisely. Precisely.
It burns 2 times.
Actually, Krishna says that specifically here, that food that is too spicy or too sour is in the mode of passion. Other things? A lot of times we really enjoy something, we buy a gadget or something, or I have this experience. When I bought my first car, the second week it got scratched, third week it got towed. So something that gave me so much happiness, I was dreading every moment of it. It was cold also. Got towed, I had to find where it is and call people up in the middle of winter Chicago. So something that has been very nice at the beginning. Relationships. At least I have had the experience of couples breaking up all the time, divorces happening. My parents are separate. So, in the first romantic time, it's very, very nice, buddy-buddy, and then something happens. Not to all of us, but a lot of us. We have seen that. So something that's based on the gratification of senses ends up starting up very, very nice and enthusiastic, but a lot of times the results at the end are not so nice. And in the mode of goodness, it's actually, in the beginning it might be a little difficult, but it always ends up in happiness. And such examples would be let's speak for our graduation. We struggle so much through papers and exams and midterms, and then finally we get the degree that for the rest of our life tells people that we have knowledge of something, a master of something, or bachelor of something, or doctorate of something. So something like that. So it's just a productive step. It's in the mode of goodness. What else? What other examples can we think of? Something that we need to work hard for, and the end it's sweet.
I was thinking volunteer work sometimes it's like that, where at the beginning it's hard and you don't know what you're doing, and afterwards you just feel like people thank you for it and feel happy about it.
Yeah.
Feel like that.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Inviting people over and you're cooking for them.
The cleaning after.
That's really quite right.
Right now we're doing this drama called Ramayana, and so Harshika Mataji, she's going through a lot, getting everybody the right actions and statements. But hopefully on the day of the drama she'll feel very proud and happy that everything went well. And people showed up and everybody did what they were supposed to. So that's happiness in the mode of goodness. Let's talk about food. This I'm expecting a little bit of questions and controversy from this part. The purpose of food is to increase the duration of life, purify the mind, and aid bodily strength. Now, when we eat, generally speaking, we generally don't think about what food is for. Anything that tastes good, we just put it in our mouth. Whether it's processed, whether it's whatever, rotten, sometimes we don't care. So, in the Bhagavad Gita again, it is very nicely given that food in the mode of goodness is vegetarian food, like fruits and vegetables, fresh. There's milk products, there are grains and pulses and sugar and other things that can lead to very, very nice and tasty food like you will be eating shortly. Krishna lunch is a very nice example of that. So people think that, what can you really make out of these? But there's actually a lot more variety in the vegetarian kingdom of food than the other side. Now, one can argue, right? Let me ask you, what is wrong with this picture?
What is wrong?
What's wrong?
Well, there are things not there,
Right,
I would say.
right. So why is that good or bad?
There's no meat.
Go ahead.
She says there's no meat. What's wrong with it?
Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to poke some conversation here.
I don't think it's good or bad, it's just a choice.
It's a choice, okay. Well, what if I say eating meat is bad? What do you say to that?
I would say, if it's bad for you, don't eat it.
Okay. What if it's bad for the animal?
It's
Who's
bad
dying? the animal that we're eating, what if it's bad for the animal? I mean, it is, right? We're killing a living entity.
Is it?
Aren't we?
Because they are also killing other animals. I mean, it's how things work. I'm not saying the humans are doing it right,
Right.
but animals kill each other. That's how life works.
So we should be like animals.
We should be like animals.
We should be.
Well, I think we are animals in part of ourselves.
Right.
Part of ourselves is not an animal. That's what makes the difference.
Right.
But we still have to eat. We still have to.
And that's very true. So to say humans are two-legged animals, unless they question life and inquire into the absolute truth and walk into the spiritual realm of existence. Because there's a difference, there's a stark difference between humans and animals. There are 4 activities that both do. Eating, sleeping, sex life, and defense. A squirrel is always scared of its acorn. We have our big defense army and nuclear bombs and whatnot to defend ourselves. Animals do that too. They have claws, teeth. Some of guys have poison, whatnot. But what distinguishes us is that we can make a choice. We can ask questions that animals cannot. A tiger can never sustain on bananas and fruits, other fruits. Tiger has to eat meat. A cow, giving a cow meat is really terrible. Cow likes grass. But for us, we have a choice. We can sustain on both. Maybe a little better, more healthier on this side than the other, but we can sustain on both. And having a choice also gives us some responsibility. Right? So for example, person who's a politician, let's say Barack Obama, he has a little bit more freedom than most of us. He doesn't have to wait in traffic. His car can just go wish, and he can pardon persons who are given life sentence, etc. So he has a little bit more freedom, which also brings a little bit more responsibility. Bill Clinton, when he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, people were like, impeach him. Whereas in most of this country and the world, people actually do that all the time, extramarital affairs. But it gets really bad when a president of the United States does that, because he has more responsibility. Thus, as human beings, given we have more intelligence, we have choice, we also have more responsibility. So thus, there's a video I would like to show.
Yeah.
There you go.
King Lear, late at night on the cliffs, asks the blind Earl of Gloucester, "How do you see the world?" And the blind man Gloucester replies, "I see it feelingly. And shouldn't we all? Animals must be off the menu because tonight they are screaming in terror in the slaughterhouses, in crates and in cages, vile, ignoble gulags of despair." You see, I heard the screams of my dying father as his body was ravaged by the cancer that killed him. And I realized I'd heard those screams before. In the slaughterhouse, their eyes stabbed out and their tendons slashed on the cattle ships to the Middle East, and the dying mother wail as a harpoon explodes in her brain as she calls out to her calf. Their cries were the cries of my father. And I discovered that when we suffer as equals. And in their capacity to suffer, a dog is a pig, is a bear, is a boy. Meat today is the new asbestos, more murderous than tobacco. CO2, methane and nitrous oxide from the livestock industry are killing our oceans with acidic, hypoxic dead zones. 90% of small fish are ground up into pellets to feed to livestock. Vegetarian cows today are the world's largest ocean predators. The oceans are dying in our time. By 2048, all our fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth.
You know,
Check
kind
the internet.
Yeah, check the internet.
secure.
Secure.
He's a vice president of Citibank in Australia.
Really?
Yeah.
Refresh.
Oh no.
Preserva's innovative features were
On behalf of St James Ethics Centre, the Wheeler Centre
Of
We're
despair,
at 2 minutes and 17 seconds.
of despair.
Sorry, I can't see anything on this screen.
Keep
so-
on going.
Oh,
There you go.
stop.
That's good.
Fisheries will be dead, the lungs and the arteries of the earth. Billions of bouncy little chicks are ground up alive simply because they are male. Only 100 billion people have ever lived. 7 billion people live today. And yet we torture and kill 2 billion sentient living beings every week. 10,000 entire species are wiped out every year because of the actions of one. And we're now facing the 6th mass extinction in cosmological history. If any other organism did this, a biologist would call them a virus. It is a crime against humanity of unimaginable proportions. But happily, the world is changing. 10 years ago, Twitter was a bird sound. www was a stuck keyboard. Cloud was in the sky. 4G was a parking space. Google was a baby's burp. Skype was a typo. And Al-Qaeda was my plumber. Victor Hugo said there is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. Well, animal rights today is now the greatest social justice issue since the abolition of slavery. Do you know there are over 600 million vegetarians in this world? And that is bigger than the United States, England, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, all put together. If we were one nation, we would be bigger than the 27 nations of the European Union. Can you believe that? And despite this massive demographic footprint, we are still drowned out by the raucous hunting, shooting, killing cartels who believe that violence is the answer when it should not even be a question. Meat kills animals, kills us, and is killing our economies. Medicare has already bankrupted the United States. They will need $8 trillion invested in treasury bills just to pay the interest, and they have precisely zero. They could shut down every school, Army, Navy, Air Force, Homeland Security, Marines, CIA, and FBI, and they still will not have the money to pay their doctor bills. And our Cornell and Harvard say that the optimum amount of meat in a healthy human diet is precisely zero. Water, as you know, is the new oil. Nations will soon be going to war for it. Underground aquifers that took millions of years to fill are now running dry. It takes 50,000 liters of precious drinking water to make 1 kilo of beef. Today, 1 billion people are hungry. 20 million people will die from malnutrition. Cutting meat by only 10% will feed 100 million people, and eliminating meat will end starvation forever. If everyone ate a Western diet, we would need 2 planet Earths to feed us. We've only got one, and she is dying. Greenhouse gas emissions from livestock is 50% greater than transport, as Peter said. Cars, trains, buses, ships, lorries, the whole lot. As I travel around the world, I see poor countries who sell their grain to the West while their own children starve in their arms. And the West feeds it to livestock so we can eat a steak? Am I the only one who sees this as a crime? Believe me, every morsel of meat we eat is slapping the tear-stained face of a hungry child. When I look into her eyes, do I remain silent? The earth can produce enough food for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. We are facing the perfect storm. If any nation had developed weapons that could wreak such havoc on the planet, we would launch a preemptive military strike and bomb it back into the Bronze Age. But it's not a rogue state, it's an industry. The good news is we don't have to bomb it. We can just stop buying it. Sir George Bush was wrong. The axis of evil does not run through Iraq, Iran, or North Korea. It runs through our dining tables. Weapons of mass destruction are our knives and forks. Our proposition is the Swiss Army knife of the future. It solves our environmental, water, human health problems and ends cruelty forever. The Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. This cruel, disgusting industry will end because we run out of excuses. Meat is like the 1 and 2 cent coins. It costs more to make than it's worth. And I come from the bush. Farmers are the ones with the most to gain. Farming won't end, it would boom. Only the product line will change. Farmers would make so much money they won't even bother counting it, and I'd be the first to applaud them. Governments would love us. New industries would emerge and flourish. Health insurance premiums would plummet. Hospital waiting lists would disappear. Hell, we'd be so healthy, we'd have to shoot someone just to start a cemetery. So tonight I have 2 challenges for the opposition. 2 challenges. Meat causes a wide range of cancers and heart disease. Would they name one disease caused by a vegetarian diet? And 2, I'm funding the Earthlings trilogy. If the opposition is so sure of their ground, I challenge them to send a copy of the Earthlings DVD to all their colleagues and all their customers. Go on, I dare you.
Okay. So, any comments, questions? Here. So, yes.
I noticed in your slide that you had milk, butter, and cheese.
Yes.
Are those vegetarian or are those considered?
This is vegetarian, not vegan.
Vegetarian.
But not vegan, yes. We're not vegans.
Okay, so vegetarian, you're still eating some cow. You're still eating whole milk. Or soy milk?
Yes, we're eating part of the cow that is not required. That doesn't require the cow to be killed.
Okay, and what part would that be?
Milk.
Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay. The milk.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So this was, there's goodness. Yes, vegetarian, vegan, however you call it. It is goodness. But is goodness good enough? That's the question. And so we have one more layer to it, as the Vedic aphorism goes. So this is from the Karma theory lecture. Just a little recap. That's the soul. And according to our karma, as we take different choices, act in different ways, we can be born as human beings in our next life. Or lower species, if we have certain desires. For example, the example given was for bears, right? If someone likes to sleep a lot, 13, 14 hours a day, a bear body is perfect. Someone is rewarded a body that they can sleep for 6 months, and stay awake for 6 months. Great. Let's say somebody likes to eat a lot of meat. Tiger body is perfect. They have a small intestine. They can just eat, digest it, walk out. That's the life they lead. Great. So everybody, whatever they desire and their karma is, they rewarded bodies accordingly. Yes.
So if you like to eat a lot of, I don't know, pork, say.
I'm being very general, just so you know. I'm not being precise. The karma is very precise and customized for each individual. Do you still have a question?
No, it's
Okay. And there are higher beings. Talk about aliens, right? They're actually beings outside this planet, according to the Vedic astronomy. And so with nice pious credit, one can go to what we call the heavenly realms. And there are also other realms that are not so nice. We can call them hellish realms. So, according to our activities, our desires, we make certain choices. We get certain reactions, whether it's in this life or next life. And thus the soul moves on from one body to another. And once we finish our good credits, let's say from the heavenly realm, we have to come back in the human form. Because the human form is the only place where we acquire karma. The other species, we actually spend our karma. So whether it's good or bad, it's not eternal damnation. It is temporary. Everything in the material world is temporary. In fact, matter is temporary, if you notice. That's the property of matter. Things grow old and crumble down, over time falls apart, just like our body. Now it's youth and fresh, a few years later, crumble down and will die. But the soul is supposed to be eternal. And so it belongs somewhere else. So we understand this part. So there is a material realm, there's a spiritual realm. And the goal of yoga is to transport us there. So whether we're vegans or we're voracious man-eaters, it doesn't matter. We will still be in the material realm. And we keep struggling here. And I'll ask you why in a moment. In the spiritual realm, without getting into too much details, we are in our true form, eternal, cognizant, and blissful. We are looking for happiness. We are actually naturally supposed to be happy in our soul form. But by being covered with matter, we are not able to experience that at all times. Cognizant, we are aware of things, we are aware of ourselves, right? So the knowledge that we're receiving from Bhagavad Gita is actually not an external thing, it's internal. We have that knowledge. The soul is very knowledgeable about things, but again, it's covered with ignorance. Just like a child. A child, if it's helped a little bit, it knows naturally how to walk or swim. The innate ability is there inside. It just needs to be brought out. And blissful, we are always supposed to be happy. Happy in what way? In our relationship with others, in our relationship with the divine, in our relationship with everything around us. Now, so why is it that the material situation, whether good or bad, is always bad? What is wrong with this realm?
When I think about it, I think every time you're reborn as a human, you have to discover all these things again and learn how to make the right decisions to be a good person. Sometimes you're born in a really terrible situation, and you get taken into, some of these stories you hear about kids in Africa that are already killing people when they're very young age and taken away from their family.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. It
keeps on going.
And so the Vedas go into also structuring that out, telling us exactly what's wrong with this materialistic situation. So there are threefold miseries. In Sanskrit it's called the adhyatmic klesha, or miseries caused by our body and mind. And we talked about the Krishna house better. So what are some of those things?
Body to be just elements that you're born with, whether it's deformity or whether it's disease, whether it's something of that nature, and mind. And there could be psychological issues, imbalances that are beyond your control.
Simple headache. Krishna has something in the back, he's torn his muscle or something. So there's always these problems. Actually, one of my friends, he was telling me that he was running through a place and suddenly his toe cracked. And he was like, I've never given any attention to my little toe till this time. Because the amount of pleasure you can receive from a little toe is very little, but the amount of pain it causes is tremendous. So body and mind, we are very much aware of that. Other living entities. I'm sure we know some living entities.
Exams by profs.
There are all kinds of living entities that give us trouble. Sometimes it's crazy bad dogs, or it can be mosquitoes, it can be bad bosses, spouses, siblings, who knows what. And then there is aerodynamic accretion, caused by natural forces. So, hurricanes, or just winter of Chicago coming up shortly.
Yes.
So problem is something that's defined as something we cannot avoid. Nobody can avoid it. Nobody wants it. But everybody has to face it. That's the definition of problem. So that's why the Vedas are very, very absolute. It's not relative. That's why we use it as a standard. These things we all face, we all have to go through. And if this wasn't good enough, of course, there is death. It scares all of us, no matter what species of life we're in. Whether it's our death, some people might say, I'm not scared of death. It might be our relative's death. Anytime I get a call after midnight, I'm scared if my grandmother, something happened to her, is she okay? It's always in fear of death. Old age. Nobody likes to be old. There's billions of dollars industries helping people with age protection and this cream and that cream. Oh man, nobody likes to look ugly. But it's a fact of life. Old age is there. When you have a material body, old age comes. Of course, disease, whether it's a little sneeze or it's cancer, comes with the body. Doesn't matter what age. So there is a lot of suffering in the material realm because we have a material body. It's not eternal, it's not full of knowledge, it's not happy. It's quite the opposite. And thus, as human beings, we start asking questions. Why is there suffering? Why are we in a place where it feels very unjust? Some people, today morning we were having a discussion in Krishna House how some people got jobs that they didn't deserve. They had really no academic credentials, and they ended up being bosses of people who had better academic credentials. And that's karma. Very brutal karma, but karma nevertheless. And B, that's how it is. That's how the situation is. It's a system where it is very fair. At the same time, it is unfair on the relative platform. It is fair on the absolute platform. So to bridge this gap, we need knowledge. So from material to spiritual, we bridge the gap through knowledge by understanding where we are, who we are, just like when we get lost our GPS current location. We find out where we are, what are things around us, what's the closest landmark. Then we need to know where we need to go. How does that place look like? We hear about that place. And then we need the knowledge to get there. You can take this exit, turn left here, turn right there. So that's what spiritual knowledge is. So the Bhagavad Gita, it is said, in this world there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Knowledge naturally brings in happiness. Have you noticed that? When we were children, everything was a mystery and confusion. Why does this happen? Why does children ask so many questions? But as we learn physics and chemistry and other things, things make more sense. We're like, now it makes sense. Gravity, yeah, sure. This, that, whatever. So knowledge, even at the material platform, gives us a lot of happiness. Ignorance can be bliss for some people, but not for most. But knowledge of the spiritual absolute truth is extremely blissful because now everything makes sense and you know your purpose. You know what you're meant for, why are things happening around you, how are things happening around you, and what you can do, what steps you can take to benefit yourself and others. Okay, so that's it for my presentation. Please apologize if I didn't do justice. Questions?
on this sheet, it talks about the food and the mode of passion brings you distress, misery, and disease.
Yes.
What does food and the mode of ignorance bring you?
What does it say?
It doesn't say.
It's prepared for.
It says what it is.
Yeah, a similar thing. It's detrimental. So, for example, alcohol is in a mode of, or intoxication, or heroin, or drugs, any kind of those things are in the mode of ignorance. And so, what do they do to us? It takes away control, right? And then somebody can draw funny things on our head while we're intoxicated, or in worst cases, we can be robbed, or bad things happen, right? I was an RA in MSV, and practically every time somebody turned 21, it was hellish for him and for me. Because he'd be in the bathroom throwing up all night, and I'll be there to help him, take to the doctor or whatever, middle of the night. Wouldn't sleep those nights, so pretty bad. So that's what it does to you. Heroin is terrible. You cannot get out of it. I was just hearing the whole science behind heroin, how it causes dopamine to explode in your brain, and you feel really high, and then you cannot get out of there. You have to keep taking it till you die in a few years. And recently, I just read about this drug from Russia that came, and 5 Americans have been attacked by it. Basically, the chemical eats away your flesh, and people end up in hospitals without, muscles, with just with bone hanging out. It's pretty terrible. It's awful. Pictures are very, very graphic. So that's what it does. It's destructive, self-destructive, and destructive to others, which is the character, the mode of ignorance. Meat also falls in the mode of ignorance, because by default, meat is putrid. It's decayed. An animal gets killed, and immediately, because it is so high in protein and other things, it starts rotting. And then, if you're in the Western world, then you'll probably be eating a dead animal after 3 or 4 months, with a lot of nitrous oxide sprayed on it to make it look red instead of gray. And that's carcinogenic and extremely bad for us. Even from a health perspective, if you forget the whole cruelty factor, from a health perspective, meat is terrible. So is the mode of ignorance. Or canned food, preservatives, food that has, like it says, cooked more than 3 hours, but we eat food that is frozen for months, and it has an expiry date for 6 months or 8 months. Terrible. And we are seeing it in the countries that are doing that. Now it's the whole world. People are suffering from many, many diseases, and new diseases are popping up. So it's terrible. So again, the importance of goodness is that it is a window into transcendence, into the spiritual life. When we are at the platform of goodness, we can appreciate spiritual life. When we are completely covered, imagine teaching physics to a drunk person. Now we might say, oh, I'm not like that. But a person covered by material circumstance or material knowledge doesn't even question life. Why is this happening? What am I eating? How is it fair that something else is happening? Here somebody's born on the riches, somebody's born on the streets. If we don't ask these questions, we are covered in ignorance, in material consciousness. And thus we move on with life on a conveyor belt and do what our parents and grandparents have done and die an unhappy life. Especially when the teeth falls off, we really regret what have we done all our lives, whether we have a lot of money or not. It is very regretful, and I know many people going through that. And thus, at the very fresh, age that we are in, it is important to take up a life of spirituality, a life of goodness, so that we can do good to ourselves and then to everybody else around us. Questions? Yes.
How do we consider vegetables and fruits to be fresh when they're already plucked and they're processed and then put in the market? When you eat it after a month, it still looks the same.
Thank you. I actually asked that question yesterday to Prabhuji. So what his answer was? His answer was that different things rot at a different rate. Meat rots on an accelerated basis. Fruits and vegetables can sustain over a long period of time. And especially if it's genetically modified, I don't know how it can, but it can sustain a long time. Nevertheless, there is problems with that too. So we try to be, as close to natural as possible. Not everybody can afford whole foods. And again, not that whole food is the best option, but We try to keep it as close to nature as possible. But nevertheless, vegetables and fruits are a million times better than other things on the other spectrum. Beings with eyes and ears. Any other questions? Yeah.
Plants are also looked at as a life, as a different part of life. But as you said that if animals are killed, they're going their path towards decay. I think that's the same thing with the plants too. Because if you chop them off, they'll start immediately decaying. So I don't know how that would be different from an animal.
Have you tried keeping a hunk of meat outside and bananas outside? Which rots faster?
I haven't tried.
Maybe that's an experiment to try. But from experience, I can tell you, I used to eat meat, so I know. Things like fish and organic things go rot very fast compared to fruits and vegetables.
Also interesting that if you look at it from a perspective of like just planting, but the fruit is the seed of the tree or the plant. So if that banana does die, there are seeds in there, at least in non-genetically modified bananas, and fruits that actually there is still life in there. So it goes into the earth and it comes up again. Which is just an interesting, I don't know how that ties into this, but to take that in perspective, if you leave a piece of meat there, it's not going to turn into a baby cow. Something kind of interesting there.
And yes, there is problems with plants also. We're killing plants, like when we're eating carrots or potatoes, we're killing the entire plant. And that's a fact. So the goal is to reduce our footprint. Being in the material world, it's impossible to be 100% perfect. We can't do that. But if you have a choice between, a cow or carrots, I would make a choice to go for carrots. Because just the amount of suffering and pain that a cow goes through to be 10 minutes of pleasure for a person.
Well, if you're on a farm and you're hungry too, and you have corn growing here, and you have a cow over there, you think about which one is easier to fill my stomach with. Do I have a knife on the ground or a gun that I can shoot the cow with and a knife to cut it up with, or do I just walk over to the corn and pull it off?
No, but
Now what you're talking about is an animal, you kill it in the middle of its lifespan, right? And you're saying if you're growing a bush and you're growing tomatoes, say, and you go and you cut off tomatoes, they're rotting, they're decaying, it's the end of that, right? You're killing it. But at the same time, most vegetables that you eat go through their entire life cycle. They birth, they grow completely, and when they're fully grown, naturally, those plants drop off. What we do is we go and we collect them just before they're about to drop off, when they're fully ripe, when they've gone through their entire life cycle, and they're going to drop off and die naturally on their own. Now, if we did that with animals, we would be vultures, right? But we don't do that. We kill an animal very young. Just think like veal. Take a cow, you kill it much before its natural life cycle. Plants, we let them live. We appreciate their life, we encourage it, and once they're ready to die, that's the point at which we eat.
So would that be the same with the animals too? If they die, then we can eat them?
Have you ever been to, a farm where they keep pigs?
I'm just asking.
Well, I'm
I
asking.
have never been, but would that be valid? Like, would that be goodness to eat if an animal dies and then we just eat it off and eat it?
Would you do that?
I'm just asking.
I'm a vegetarian, so I wouldn't do that.
No, because your theory says that if you appreciate the whole lifespan of a vegetable or, for example, a tomato, and then it just falls off and you eat it.
Sure.
Why would that be different for an animal?
Because we don't do that with animals. Go ahead.
I was just going to, I don't know how this conversation is headed, but at the end of a lifespan of a tomato, it's actually fresh to be eaten. But end of a lifespan of a cow, it's diseased and so there's a difference.
Why did the cow die?
Yeah. In addition to that, I think, I read a report and it said that to digest a vegetarian food, a proper cooked vegetarian food, it takes about 4 to 6 hours. But in case of meat, a piece of meat takes 48 hours to digest completely, and it is rotting in your body for 48 hours. Now that is something to think of. So I think it's healthier to eat a diet that gives you nutrition within the 6-hour span rather than the 48-hour span.
And there is 8 pounds of meat that is in a meat eater's life generally that is stuck in the intestines on an average scale. That's rotting because it didn't move or it got stuck somewhere. So that creates toxins and other things. So our body is actually not, we don't have the fangs and other things that tigers have. or the acidic stomach, we have a basic stomach. Even our digestive system is not designed to be meat eaters. So even from a health perspective, like he said, studies from Harvard and Cornell has found that the amount of meat we should consume is 0.
And a lot of people have thyroid problems and different, different hormonal problems. And research shows that the people who eat meat have higher propensity. Reason being, when you're eating an animal, all the hormones that it has some effect on your body in some shape or form always.
And cancer is the biggest thing.
Exactly.
Cancer. It's very clearly defined that the countries that eat the most amount of meat have the most amount of cancer. It's directly correlated.
Can it also be seen as the burial ground of all their bodies?
The what?
The burial ground. Your body becomes the burial ground of all their bodies.
Sure. Okay.
Did we mention, I'm not sure if we talked about this yet today, but that a person's digestive system is much longer than an animal that eats meat? Did we talk about that already today?
I kind of touched on it, but if you don't talk about it, sure.
I wasn't sure the exact numbers. You would know much better than I would, but...
I thought it was something like 20 feet. Is that right?
Yeah, it's about 20 feet.
And the tiger's is more like 5. And it's acidic, so it can really quickly digest the meat and throw it out. Whereas ours really go through a long process, like you said. And we hardly are able to get anything out of it. It's very inefficient. A cow can eat, it takes, I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact numbers, but it's like exorbitant amount of corn that leads to so many pounds of beef. So much corn can actually feed so many more human beings compared to one cow, how much it can feed. It can feed one person.
I think soy production.
Yeah.
There's a huge soy production in the US only to feed cattle. So if that was given to humans, it would kind of solve.
American Soybean Association. Yes.
I'm going to say I would like to say 3 things. I don't know if I'm going to remember all of them by the end of the first one, but I will try. So, the first one. From this point of view of humanity doing wrong to the planet, I think being vegetarian is as bad as eating meat, but only vegetarian is good, because the cruelty happens the same for the cow you kill and for the chicken that puts the egg. You don't kill the chicken, but it has a longer terrible life, because you don't kill him. You just keep them there, putting eggs every day till it dies in a small. So eating eggs.
We don't eat eggs.
Okay. That's the difference between vegetarian and vegan, right? So
No.
There is butter and other things also. Vegans don't eat anything. They don't take honey or milk.
Right.
Or,
So that would be more not being cruel.
Right.
But eating that would be as cruel as killing a cow, because you're making an animal suffer.
A vegetarian will not eat egg also.
No
egg. No eggs.
Okay. Because okay. Perfect. The second thing. The countries that eat more meat have more cancer. That's true. But I don't think they are correlated. The countries with more cancer are the ones more developed, and the countries that eat more meat are the ones more developed also. Why? Because the countries more developed had unhealthy lives, the people, because you have pollution, you have things in the food, like unnatural things in the food. You have the clothes, like all the stuff is unnatural, so that produces cancer.
Toxins,
and diseases and all the stuff.
Okay.
But
the food doesn't have any effect.
But also the developed countries are fond of eating meat, more meat than we need. If it's not 0, it's in any case, in any study shows that it's lower than we eat meat. Maybe we could eat meat like once a week, and that would be like cover all of necessities, but we do it every day or every 2 days, and that's more than our body needs. So I don't think eating meat is related.
What's the basis
cancer.
for what you're stating? Is it your own conviction, or is it based on the scientific research?
No.
Whether it's once a week or every day of the week, how do you know that is the proper amount of meat?
Well, I haven't tested it. The studies show that, I haven't heard before this 0 thing, because I think you have, I don't know, there's other studies I've heard say that you have to consume proteins in your body, so there are these solutions.
Sure.
But I don't know if that's an industry or a real necessity for humans.
There's actually a huge group of athletes who are growing, they call themselves vegan athletes, because they can actually consume the same amount of protein from pulses and beans than eating cows, because animals, do give protein, yes, but there's a lot more that comes with it.
Yeah.
You can get like so much more protein from like eating spinach or like dark green leaves and like eating meat, and like an ounce of like beans is like you get just as much protein as eating like a healthy meat. But the beans are just so much better for you because it has like low acidity and no cholesterol, and it's just like very different from eating meat.
I don't know. I haven't done these studies. I personally don't trust the studies because there are many. All the studies say different things.
Sure.
I don't know if you have noticed that, but it's 1 cup of wine is good for your health every day, and then next year, no, you shouldn't consume wine at all because it has something that.
Right.
So I'm very suspicious about all this.
Sure.
It's based on relative.
Sorry.
Based on something relative, not absolute. It's relative. That's why you don't trust. You don't trust.
I just don't know what studies
What to believe, what not to
and
believe.
Yeah, but I question myself like, it's not. It's like I know I'm living in.
I'm with you. I actually do the same thing. It's when something scientific comes up, like, drinking tea will reduce your cancer, something. Yeah, sure, why not? But the meat part, I've actually done thorough research on it, and it's as obvious, as clear as water. Like, you can actually, it's a fact. It's not like any argument. The cause, the amount of pain and suffering, that's one aspect. But the amount of pain and suffering caused to your body, that's a fact. It's not under any argument. You can ask the meat industry, for example, and they will also tell you that it's not healthy to eat meat.
Red meat increases your cholesterol. Everyone says, the doctors say that. Don't eat red meat.
And especially the stuff they feed to the cows. Now, if you talk about factory farming, what goes through is terrible.
It is.
The amount of poison they just inject into the cows so they become fat. They can get more meat. So it's just a very hazardous situation. But we're not focusing on that. We're focusing more on the softer side of things. It's just not moral to do that. It's just not fair that another sentient being, and our understanding is every sentient being has soul, part of God, part of the divine in them. So anybody who's conscious, feels, thinks, killing such a innocent being just for my own pleasure, it's wrong. So, when you do something wrong, what happens? The karma. So we talked about karma. You weren't here. So from that perspective, we don't do things. We try to reduce our footprint as much as possible. Cause as less problems as possible.
And about karma, if you are always in the cycle, like
you're not always in the cycle. The goal is to get out of the cycle.
But can you stop being in the cycle?
Yes. That's the goal of spirituality. That's exactly what we're studying here.
Oh, good.
Thank you very much for the questions. Anything else?
A stark example, which I like always, is India's Olympic winning wrestling team. They're pure vegetarians.
Wrestling?
A wrestling team which went to the Olympics and won. They're all vegetarians. So, I've read their diet, and it's like so many glasses of milk in the morning, paneer and all the good stuff.
Okay, we'll break up for lunch. If there's more questions, feel free.
Thank you.